Thank you, Kimberly. So welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Olga Nikolajev. I am, as Kimberly said, an end-of-life nurse educator, and I will be presenting to you all of the particulars, the steps of advanced care planning, the what, the why, the who, when, and how of advanced care planning. This particular slide deck was put together by the Advanced Care Planning Champions as part of the Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association of Canada initiative. So it is a national campaign to bring information to the public about advanced care planning. So I want to give here part of our objectives is to hopefully engage you in thinking about advanced care planning, explain the 5 steps of advanced care planning and get into more details, and hopefully to help you to plan to start some of those conversations with the people that matter to you, as well as your healthcare providers, and as well helping you to identify or validate or choose your particular substitute decision maker. And we'll get into the particulars a little bit later, because there are some variabilities depending on where you are in Canada and what province you live in, because a lot of the advanced care planning process is really determined by provincial legislation in relationship to decision making and who would have the authority and responsibility to speak for you if you were not mentally capable to speak for yourself. So I want to welcome you. I am a registered nurse. My master's is actually in religion and culture. So I have a very holistic view of understanding specifically end of life. I have worked as a nurse in a number of different organizations and a different level of healthcare, both primary care, community care, chronic illness care, diabetes care. And currently for the last probably 5 to 10 years, I have really focused on specifically hospice palliative care, end of life, and even more so focused on providing education to the public, as well as mentoring and training end-of-life doulas, which is kind of a new enhanced role to provide support to families in navigating end-of-life care decisions. And then the FT is also stands for Fellow in Thanatology. So, and thanatology is the study of death and dying, looking at the different systems and how we can shift our cultural perspective and views and really expand the conversation so that we can collectively better care for ourselves and those that we care for, especially at the end of life. I want to do a bit of disclosures here. So I currently am a college facilitator for Douglas College, which is a college in British Columbia that offers the end-of-life doula program, as well as Centennial College, which is in Ontario, and I work as a facilitator offering the thanatology program. I'm also the founder and director of the Death Doula Ontario Network, which is a collaborative network bringing end-of-life doulas together specifically in Ontario to provide a peer-to-peer support as well as ongoing education. I am a member of the Association of Death Educators and Counselors, as well as a national organization called Educator, which provides, again, collaboration with other cannabis educators, as I have also some training in providing support for people who might be utilizing cannabis as a medicine. And I am also a member of the End-of-Life Doula Association of Canada and have my own business as a way of providing my end-of-life nurse education services to the public. So before we begin, I want to do a land acknowledgement. I wish to acknowledge and honor the ancestral guardians, the Métis, First Nations, and Inuit people of the lands and waterways of Canada. Today, many Indigenous peoples continue to call these lands home and act as their stewards. And this responsibility extends to all people to share and care for this land for generations to come. I am in Eastern Ontario, just about an hour south of Ottawa along the St. Lawrence River. And this is the unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee people and the Iroquois Nation. So here are our particular guidelines. And as Kimberly said, I will be primarily on camera here and providing information for you. If you have any questions as we are going along, I have the chat open, and if you know how to use the chat, then please do that. Otherwise, if you want to jot down a question or a comment or some insight, we'll have an opportunity to share in the larger group after the presentation. I'm hoping again that we will respect each other as a way of also acknowledging that we may be coming from different value perspectives and beliefs. So ensuring that we have a really safe and brave space with non-judgment to talk about the things that are important to you in relationship to advanced care planning. And then I'm hoping that you'll also have an opportunity to share what you learned from this session as a way of encouraging other folks to get some information around advanced care planning and how it can be helpful in their life planning. So if you are new to Zoom, you can rename yourself if you wish. If you want to do that, all of you are currently muted right now. And then I think Kimberly will guide us through unmuting if you have a question at the end. And as she has already said, you can either stay on video or go off video. And if you are able to utilize the chat, that will be a good opportunity, as I said, to put down any questions. The navigation bar is usually on the bottom of your screen. Sometimes it disappears, so you may need to kind of wiggle your mouse a little bit to get it activated, and then put on, click onto the chat, and then you'll be able to write your comment or your question. And for those of you who are on video, you can also raise your hand if there's something that you need to ask, or you can also utilize from the navigation bar under reactions, a little raise hand option that I'm showing you right now. So that's another way that you can grab my attention if there's a question. So what is advanced care planning? And I just want to make a small note. It is advanced, which means that it's in advance. It's not advanced more of, although over time there might come a time and point where some of your advanced discussions are about advanced care, more care, depending on your particular health status or the type of needs that you may have or those that you are supporting. So fundamentally, advanced care planning is a lifelong process thinking about what matters to you, your particular values and goals, as a way of having those discussions with hopefully the person who would be deemed your substitute decision maker or your proxy. There are a number of different terms that are used across Canada. That person who would have that responsibility and authority to potentially make decisions on your behalf if you were not mentally capable. And so advanced care planning fundamentally is not about end of life. It is about being able to have those discussions so that your substitute and yourself feel good and confident about the values, beliefs that you have, quality of life that you want in relationship to care, and in relationship also to maybe some of the other aspects that need to be taken care of, such as finances, and may also include discussions in relationship to end of life and post-death, such as estate planning, those kinds of aspects. So again, fundamentally, advanced care planning is something that we do throughout our whole life. As maybe our healthcare changes or circumstances in our life, relationships change, or as we acquire maybe more responsibility and will need to inform those people that would have that responsibility authority so they can have the information that they need in order to maybe manage our finances and our care, as I said. So it's really about talking to the people who matter most to you, the people in your life, your spouse, your children, your parents, your grandparents, and also include in that the conversations with your healthcare providers so they have a good sense, again, of the wishes that you may have for care and how to really work with your substitute decision makers in order to ensure that your wishes are followed. So what if you were too ill or hurt to make decisions for yourself? And it's not only about loss of the ability to communicate, but advanced care planning is really about being able to know and feel confident about and having your substitute decision maker make decisions for you when you are not mentally capable to make those decisions yourself. There is a number of different literature that's offered nationally across Canada in relationship to advanced care planning by different organizations. And some of them do mention, not having the ability to speak. But I want to make sure that we have a good grounded understanding that it's not only about the inability to speak, because maybe I would have mental capacity to make decisions and my way of communicating may not be talking, but I could write things down or signal yes or no. So we really want to make sure that you have a good understanding that it's about having the mental capacity to make decisions for yourself. And mental capacity is really having the understanding of a decision that needs to be made and the appreciation of that decision, whether it's, maybe an acceptance of a treatment or even a refusal or a withdrawal of a treatment. So it's really the whole process of informed decision making. And fundamentally, I think the initial sort of introduction to advanced care planning is also to have a good understanding as to knowing who would be tasked to make those decisions, because sometimes families, and especially the substitute decision maker, may be tasked to make that decision even at times when they didn't realize that they would be the one to be asked by healthcare providers if their particular person has lost mental capacity. Now, again, sometimes people have questions about who determines the level of mental capacity. And that really depends on the particular situation, family dynamic. But in general, the decisions that would need to be made in your healthcare, your capacity is always assessed by the healthcare provider who is asking for the particular decision. And that's why it's not always clear cut, because someone could have the mental capacity to make decisions about what they wear, what they want to eat, who they want to hang out with, but they may not have the mental capacity to make decisions around specific interventions, or maybe where they live, or maybe may not have the mental capacity to make financial decisions. So sometimes the capacity, not sometimes, all of the time, the capacity will really depend on the type of decision that needs to be made. The other element of capacity is that sometimes our mental capacity can be low or high, that there are certain illnesses or diseases that people live with that in certain moments, such as somebody living with diabetes, where they may have a low blood sugar, and so they may not have the mental capacity to understand a decision. That's when someone else may need to come in, their substitute, to make decisions on their behalf in their best interest. And then they may regain mental capacity when they recover from not having, from having that low blood sugar. And so sometimes mental capacity can come and go as well. Now, again, one of the things that we can't always anticipate is if there is an accident or a sudden illness that actually enables us to lose mental capacity and to lose that communication. So advanced care planning fundamentally, as I said, is for everyone. So everyone has good knowledge and has that confidence in their substitute decision maker in order to make decisions on their behalf. So here is a new, particular new resource that has been fairly recent in Canada, which is the Living Well and Planning Well document. And I'm going to include a resource in the chat for you. And I think Kimberly will also email you that link post this webinar. So be reassured that you will get some of that information. But I'm putting this up here because one of the things that has happened in relationship to advanced care planning information is that initially advanced care planning really focused on healthcare. And it was something that was really around intervention and ensuring that substitute decision makers had really good understanding of the task that they would have to undertake if their person was mentally not capable to make those decisions. And throughout probably the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, what we have realized is that there's other decisions that would need to be made, such as financial decisions, which may have an impact on decisions related to healthcare, especially if somebody would have to be moved into, let's say, a facility or retirement home, long-term care home, or a rehabilitation center. They might need to also have some financial support. So again, it's kind of expanding the conversation into broader understanding that some of the finances would also have to be directed by the substitute. And then there's also the inclusion of the estate planning, and why sometimes advanced care planning gets confused with estate planning. So it's really, again, identifying that there are these 3 specific areas that work together and really are in its completion, the overarching life planning or advanced care planning. And we'll talk more about these particular sections as we go through. So let me just put in a bit of a reflective question, nothing that you have to answer in the chat or put up your hand about, but just for you to think about, do you have financial plans, especially for maybe your retirement, or maybe if you were not able to bring in finances or be able to work. It's something that I think about as a single person, not having dependents, not having my parents here, not having a lot of folks who would be able to provide that financial support. I have to continually plan for the possibility of maybe, not having the financial stability, especially if I was to be sick or not have the ability to work for a period of time. Also, think about how many of you maybe have wills as a way of ensuring that your beneficiaries and your estate is taken care of, your all of the different specific jobs that the executor would have to do, but fundamentally so that somebody else would be able to take care of your estate and the things that you have. So if any of you have wills, or even having life insurance. I just recently acquired some chronic illness insurance because I'm now getting older. There's more health complexity in my life. And so I want to make sure that I have the things that I need to sustain my current life. And I'm wondering if any of you have also had some conversations specifically around advanced care planning. What kind of care would you like? What are your particular values and wishes and beliefs around the kind of care that you would want, which may include as well end-of-life care planning. Now, why is advanced care planning important? Well, it's important because life can change at any moment. And I think some of you know something about that in relationship to having a diagnosis, having now potentially living with and caring for yourself with certain illness. More and more people need to know about our goals and wishes and values so that they understand how we would make decisions for ourselves. Because fundamentally, our substitute decision maker, our proxy or our representative has to make those decisions based on what we would want, based on the best interest for us. So it's not about what they would want for themselves, but what do they know about us? Sometimes when I'm educating end-of-life doulas, I sometimes encourage them to engage the client families that they're working with to not only talk about maybe interventions, hypothetically thinking about interventions that people would want or not want, but also think about some of the comfort measures or the things that bring us comfort when we are not well and maybe navigating maybe an illness. And those might be things like the inclusion of our pets in the care that we receive, the inclusion of, small sort of comfort measures, having the things that we need in order for us to feel that we have still a good quality of life or the comfort that we would want. Again, I have throughout my career as a nurse and working as a palliative care nurse in the community, often found myself working with families at the end of life when they didn't necessarily know what their person would have wanted, what their wishes would have been, because they never had these kinds of conversations. So it's really about having those conversations a lot earlier, because like I said, sometimes we can't anticipate an accident or a healthcare emergency. And so we need to continue to have these conversations with the people that are in our life who would be tasked in providing and supporting the care that we would need. And I can tell you from personal experience, both personally and professionally, that it's a lot easier. Although it's not easy, it is easier to have these conversations a lot earlier, because sometimes it can be too late. And I have had supported families in which they've had a lot of guilt, a lot of blame, because they didn't know what their person would have wanted. And so really encourage you to have some of these not easy conversations with your own family, and including your healthcare providers, because they are also ones who can provide you with some factual knowledge in relationship to interventions or the kind of care that you can receive. I think oftentimes in our society, we make assumptions that the care will be there when we need it. And the reality is that that may not necessarily be so. And that sometimes the planning takes a bit of time to ensure that we have the care that we want and need. So who is advanced care planning for? Well, it's there for everyone. In Ontario, if you're over the age of 16, you could be tasked at being a substitute decision maker in your family, especially if there isn't anyone else and you're willing to take on that role. So it is really for everyone. It's not only for people who are at the end of life or who may be living with a particular illness, but it is for everyone, because we may not be able to anticipate some of the accidents or unexpected illnesses that we may experience. But it is definitely more urgent for folks, especially if they already have a diagnosis and are living with a particular illness. And in some respect, you may have some more sense of the kind of interventions that would be up for grab, or you may have some more understanding of the type of trajectory or the type of experience through your life with living with a specific illness. In my family, there's heart disease as well as colon cancer, some respiratory diseases as well. And so even though I'm not living with those might be part of my life experience, because they are part of my genetics. They are part of what I may encounter in my life in relationship to illness. And then it's also really important to have some of these conversations, especially when your family dynamic may be quite diverse. For some people, they may have a family of choice rather than a family of origin, or to also have more clarity around who could serve as the substitute and what you could do if maybe the person who would be deemed your automatic is not the best appropriate person. Especially, again, if there might be some friction or if they might be some diverse beliefs within your own particular family. So when is the right time to do advanced care planning? Well, I usually engage in some advanced care planning on my birthday. I figure, oh, another year. So let me refresh my advanced care planning conversation with myself first to see where I'm at. How do I need to put certain things in place for my life to be sustained? and then how to engage my substitute decision maker to make sure that they are still confident about and have all the information that they need from me in order to make the best decisions for me if they had to do that. But certainly we can also initiate those advanced care planning conversations when we have those life's milestones, you know, buying a house. Again, I just recently last year moved into my new home, so I had to make sure that my will had some allocation for my executor to potentially sell my home. Who would be in charge of that? Who would be in charge of all of the things that I have? Because in my life and my life circumstances, I don't have a present partner or a spouse who would automatically potentially be able to do that. I am the only one on my deed, and so I need to make sure that I put in place some of those planning. Again, having children, you know, how do we plan for ensuring that our children have what they need if we weren't able to provide for them because of illness or our end of life, changes in living situations. Again, that was part of my experience going through a separation divorce and then buying a house on my own. But it could also be if there's any health events, you know, or even travels. I'm going on a trip to visit my parents in Europe next week. And so I need to make sure that the people that are close to me here have some of that information just in case something was to happen to me. It's not like it hasn't happened to other people, and I'm not outside of the sort of the norm of something happening. And I think it's also important when our life and our health changes in order to, again, have that confidence and reassurance that the person who may be tasked in making those decisions for us has really good information. So how to do advanced care planning? Well, it's not a one-time event. Oftentimes, it's not about a plan. It's about conversations. The plan could be part of the conversations that you have, but it might be, again, something that has to be revised, reviewed. And it also is about being able to think about, to talk about, to review, and to also get really good awareness in relationship to some of the differences across the country. Because as I said, the advanced care planning process, decision-making process is really lying on top of the legal framework within each province. And so in Ontario, we don't necessarily have advanced directives. You may have heard of those, where in Quebec, Nova Scotia, British Columbia, they do. So people have the ability to be a little bit more instructive in the particular care that they would like to receive. In Ontario, we have in legislation the mention of wishes. So you can still write those things down, but they're not necessarily going to be translatable into decisions. Fundamentally, advanced care planning is not about decisions. It's about the conversation and the hypothetical conversations of the kind of care that you would like to receive, and who would make those decisions for you if you were not mentally capable in doing that. So the Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association of Canada and the Advanced Care Planning Champions have identified these 5 steps to take you through the process of advanced care planning. And the first is to think about one's values, wishes, beliefs, and your understanding of the kind of care and treatment that you would want, to learn about potentially some of those medical interventions, to learn about maybe the legal framework within the province where you live, to decide upon your substitute decision maker, or to validate that, confirming that the one that you may have, which may be automatic as it is in the case of Ontario, is something that you want. Again, these are not about decisions for treatment, but more so about ensuring that you have that faith and confidence in your substitute, and then to talk to them, right? To give them the information that they would need in order to make those decisions for you if they had to in the future, so that giving them as much information about the kind of care that you would want. And then potentially to either record who is the person, have a little piece of card in your wallet to say, this is my substitute decision maker, this is who you want to contact. Or it might also be recording some of those particular wishes that you have. I have one small wish that isn't about treatment, because sometimes, again, in healthcare, there's so much focus on treatment. And this, sometimes the comfort measures or the small things are sometimes what matters. As an example, I don't like my sheets tucked in. And so my substitute needs to know that, because if I'm not mentally capable to let somebody know, and maybe I'm in a hospital or a facility and they do those wonderful nurse hospital bed corners, I may be a little bit restless in my unconsciousness. And so that may be perceived by the healthcare providers as me experiencing restlessness, but it may not actually be so. So I need to also give some of that kind of information to my substitute, so they can say, hey, she doesn't like her sheets tucked in. Maybe that's why she's wrestling with the sheets, because she's trying to untuck them and let her feet out. It can be something which may be seen as really mundane, but could make a big difference in the comfort and even in the treatment that I would receive. So again, step one is to think about, what makes your life worth living? What are the things that you really enjoy? Sometimes there are really big decisions that need to be made, especially when maybe there is the risk of loss of life, right? What is the type of quality of life and comfort? What does that mean to you? Would you want to be in a facility? Would that be okay for a period of time as opposed to indefinitely? Sometimes as you may progress in understanding advanced care planning more deeply, you'll come to realize that there are these nuances that sometimes, again, might be about the things that offer you comfort, or the interventions that may only have a time limit. In my sort of notes to my substitute, I have said to them, try an intervention for 3 to 4, 7 days. If it works, if it improves my quality of life, great. But if it doesn't, then maybe it's not an intervention that I want to stay on for the remainder of my life. Hopefully that makes sense. The next is potentially to learn about, not necessarily interventions, but certainly the informed decision-making process. And the decision-making process is really about having the conversations with healthcare providers who may know some really important information about the kind of care that is potentially sort of being offered, but also to engage in that conversation to see, which treatment would be best. What are the side effects? What are the possible impacts if we do this and if we don't do this? And what are the possible measures that could offer some comfort measures or pain relief that are maybe outside of maybe the medical care, and could be introduced or brought forth and are an important part of maybe your particular care. I have a friend of mine who I am her power of attorney for care. And if there was ever a time that she was not mentally capable to make those decisions for her, I would be tasked to make decisions on her behalf. And one of the things is that she has some food sensitivities and some preferences for foods. And so I would have to, again, inform the healthcare providers of some of the values or some of the details that may not have been captured sort of in her healthcare file. Catherine here, I loathe the fan or wind blowing directly on me, right? So, my mom has a similar kind of thing. She hates anything like that. And so again, it could be something simple, but if we don't ever talk about it, if we don't let our substitute know, that could be really uncomfortable for some people, in the same sense of having those sheets tucked in, right? It could be the true meaning or the difference of having comfort or not comfort. Again, the 3 here is deciding on what matters most to you, but also around, is the substitute decision maker that automatically that you may have, are they actually the best person? Could they make decisions on your behalf? And if you are in relationship, then is your spouse maybe at risk for some health issues? And who would then be the substitute if they were not able to act as a willing substitute on your behalf, right? Do they need some support as well in relationship to having that confidence and the ability? Do they have the ability to advocate for you if they had to do that? And again, they don't necessarily have to be making decisions all by themselves, but again, having that conversation with those other folks who could provide support for them. I wanted to share this with you. This is the substitute decision-making hierarchy that exists within Ontario specifically. It's part of the Ontario Healthcare Consent Act, which was established in 1996, which really highlights who would automatically fall as your substitute decision maker. And if they were not willing or not able, who would then have that responsibility and authority, and what you may need to do if you don't have any of these automatics or don't want any of these automatics. So as you see here, anything in the green is automatic. You don't have to do anything. You may have heard of powers of attorney for personal care and finance, but again, in depending on the type of family that you have, your spouse or partner, common law or married, oftentimes automatically would be tasked with those decisions, to make those decisions. If they are not able or willing, then it would fall to your parents or your children. And when it comes to children, it doesn't have to be, there's again no hierarchy in relationship to the eldest or the gendered sort of roles, but it will be equal. The children can decide for 1 or 2 people to be the primary, and then the healthcare providers would work with them. And then it keeps going down. Really, healthcare providers don't want to be making any of these decisions for you. They want to make sure that family members have that right to make those decisions on your behalf. And the public guardian and trustee is really the last resort to make those decisions on your behalf. Now, this is also a hierarchy for children as well, who are not able to make decisions for themselves because of age or not being mentally capable. And so you see here the parent of right to access. And then anything in the yellow would require some kind of a legal step. As you know, creating attorneys for personal care or finance don't necessarily require a lawyer to do those, but they do require that the process be followed in this specific instructional format in order for it to be legal. And it requires 2 witnesses who are not part of your care or sometimes not even part of your family as a way of bearing witness to the person's ability, being mentally capable to assign someone else. So the only people who can assign someone to be their power of attorney for personal care and finance have to be themselves mentally capable in order to do that. Okay, and then you also see here that there's representative appointed by the consent capacity board. So in those situations in the where the family is not appropriate, or there isn't a family, or there's an assignment, again, of that representative, or somebody could appeal to serve as the representative, or there might be a court-appointed guardian. Again, in general, most people wouldn't necessarily need to have somebody appointed, but they may engage in those powers of attorney. So it's really, really important to talk to the people that matter most to us, especially the ones who may be tasked in making those decisions for us if we were not able. It's important to talk to them about the wishes that we have, right? What is important? What do we value? what gives us comfort. And I can tell you that I've been surprised in those situations, even when husband and wife, partners have these conversations. Sometimes they didn't realize sort of the nuances or some of the wishes that the person has. They actually had very diverse ways of approaching planning for care. And so it's good that they had this conversation, because otherwise they wouldn't have known the specific details. I had one friend in particular who's actually a nurse practitioner, had this conversation with her husband and realized that he probably wouldn't have been the best person. And so she actually had a conversation with her daughter, who is now more so her substitute decision maker. Of course, having some insight from her father, my friend's husband, but he just was not maybe able to emotionally, mentally, to make those kinds of decisions for her. And so it was good that they had that chat, right? Again, who do we need to talk to? So we need to specifically talk to our substitute decision maker. Are they comfortable? Are they willing? Because they also have to be willing to make those decisions for us if we are not mentally capable to do so. It's also, I think, vital to talk to the extended family, to talk to friends or other folks who may be providing support, maybe providing support not only to you, but to your substitute. And then why do we do this? Because we want to ensure that they are prepared emotionally, mentally, practically for some of the things that they may be tasked with in making those decisions, and really ensuring that they're following our best interest. So again, opening up the conversation about maybe diverse values. I have a really neat tool that I use with my client families, which is called the Go Wish cards. And they kind of enable a family together to talk about what is most important to them in relationship to care. And specifically, it is around end of life. And so sometimes there are differences, and there may need to be a deeper exploration, and maybe what is comfort, what is dignity, some of the sort of the particular goals that the person may have in relationship to care. And then, of course, anyone else who would be willing to support the substitute, as well as your healthcare providers. That's a really key piece, to talk to your family doctor, talk to the nurse practitioner, talk to any of the care coordinators folks, as a way of also informing them of your particular values and wishes, and letting them know that you've had this conversation with your substitute decision maker. Continuing on to the talking, step 4, what would you talk to them about? I just reiterated that. I'm a little bit ahead of my slide here. What's important, your goals for care, and including even your fears. Maybe there's a fear. Oftentimes people have a number of different fears, especially at the end of life, related to pain, related to maybe worried about the concern that they have for the people that are left behind. And so there are things that could be put in place, such as the will, having those kinds of conversations that could give the person some reassurance that things will be taken care of. And then how to have this conversation. As I said, no easy task, but hopefully it'll be done in a way, when you have time, when you are relaxed. Sometimes I give clients tools of sort of the beginning sentences, which might be something like, hey, the neighbor was taken to hospital the other day, and I want to make sure that, what kind of care that I would want. Would it be okay if we have a conversation? Because that kind of scared me a little bit, right? Again, choosing a comfortable place so that maybe it happens at the dinner table, and we can make it part of an ongoing conversation in relationship to the kind of care that we would like to receive. And then start by discussing your present health concern. This is what's happening for me right now. This is what I know about my particular illness or what may happen in the future. And I want to make sure that you feel grounded and confident with maybe making decisions for me in the future if I'm not able to. So having that open dialogue and continuing to have that conversation throughout the whole process. And then 5 is really the recording of maybe the wishes, maybe some of the thoughts of the things that are important, such as Catherine not having a fan blowing on you. It's also about potentially having an identification in your wallet or somewhere so that in case of an emergency, people know who to contact to connect with somebody who has already been informed of your particular values and your wishes, right? And then there could be some potential, especially as I said, if a family has diverse values or certain struggles in relationship to authority, maybe there might need to be a process that you go through as a way of legally assigning maybe somebody outside of your family who would be a much better substitute decision maker for you. I've included one document there, and I'll put another one in the chat, which is a small 2-page, which has sort of a way for you to input some of that information, even some information, sensitive information related to maybe an insurance policy or life insurance, or also, you know, I'm gathering together all the information related to the upkeep of my home, hydro accounts, the gas account, so that if somebody else had to take care of some of those things, they would have this one place that they could go to, or they would have from me in order to make sure that they can maintain all of those things on my behalf. It has happened before where people have had an emergency or an accident and have been taken to hospital and maybe spent months in the hospital and have actually lost their apartment, lost their condo, or even you know, risk of losing their home because there wasn't anyone else who was able to ensure that some of the financial details were taken care of while they were recovering from their particular illness or injury. Again, in Ontario, we have 2 specific powers of attorney, one for personal care, and as well as the power of attorney for finance, or what is also called the power of attorney for enduring property. There are 2 specific things that you need to know, and that is that the power of attorney for personal care in Ontario will not be sort of enacted until you are mentally not capable to make decisions. Then the healthcare provider will say, who's the substitute or who's the power of attorney that we can turn to in order to provide us with the information that we need as we move forward in making decisions about care. The power of attorney for finance or enduring property gives the person, the substitute, the attorney, already the right to make some of those decisions on their behalf, and is not relying on the person being mentally incapable. I'll give you an example. I am the power of attorney for care and finance for my parents because they live in Europe, and so I have the ability to complete their taxes every year. So the accountant has the copy of the power of attorney for finance, even though my parents are mentally capable to do that for themselves, but they have given me the authority to do that on their behalf, right? The case is not the same for the power of attorney for personal care. That only, the healthcare provider is always asking the primary person first for those decisions and assessing their mental capacity in order to ensure self-determination and autonomy. So in review, remember that advanced care planning is not a one-time event. It's important to review regularly. Why do we do it? It's an effort to better understand healthcare and treatment options that may change over time. It's also to convey our particular values, our goals of the kind of treatment and the quality of life that we would want. When I think all the time, whenever your life, and especially whenever your life or health circumstances may change, your life, you know, your family life may change. How do we do advanced care planning? By following those 5 steps. And maybe, again, it's not something that we would do in sort of a one time or go through all of the steps. You may require a little bit more time to learn about maybe interventions. A lot of folks oftentimes think that CPR is very successful, and under most circumstances, it actually isn't as successful as we would like it to be, or as we see on television or movies, that it actually is not as successful. Again, following that process, talking to your substitute, talking to the healthcare providers, talking to the other people who would be able to support your substitute. Oh, and then that's it.